Hello, I'm Dr. Michael Kessler, and I'm here with Dr. Sandra Bicchetti, and we're going to start on the NeuroVIZR Education Part 3 and how NeuroVIZR capitalizes on the concept of how the brain learns.
NeuroVIZR is not intended to replace the services and/or medical advice of a licensed healthcare practitioner, nor is it meant to encourage diagnosis or treatment of disease. It is for research, education, and entertainment purposes only. Any applications of suggestions set forth in the NeuroVIZR or this training is solely at the discretion and risk of the health provider. Implementation or experimentation with any supplements, herbs, dietary changes, medication, and/or lifestyle changes, including NeuroVIZR, etc., is done so at your own risk and responsibility. It is important that you work within the scope of your professional license and state laws.
Thank you, Dr. Bicchetti. So here we have this guy named Hebe, and he was kind of revolutionary in the fact that we used to think in modern times that the brain, once we get older, wasn't able to change and create more neural pathways. But that, obviously, we now know is not true. But he looked at this in the 1940s and was the kind of the forerunner for what we call neuroplasticity. So this is a paper that he wrote, but let's break it down. What did he actually do? So he took these rats that had the same genetic lineage and he divided them in half. And in one group, they lived in an enriched sensory environment, kind of like those kids on the left. And they thrived, they had a good life, and they were stimulated, right? Versus the one on the right, which is kind of a boring, unenriched sensory environment. Then he euthanized them after a time, and he looked at their brains. And the enriched sensory experience brains are much larger and had a lot of neural connections, more so than the boring, unenriched sensory environment that we see on the right. And so we now have a little bit of history on neuroplasticity and what's necessary to create that.
The 5 things needed for generalized brain stimulation and growth that is predictable. Number 1, engage 2 of the senses at the same time. Number 2, unique and uncommon experience. Number 3, distraction-free, confined experience. 4, not forced and of free will. And number 5, enjoyable and entertaining.
So what I have to say on this is a couple things. And number one, when we talk about engaging, we're going to use 2 sensory inputs. One is being the light that comes out of the neurovisor, and the other is the auditory aspect of the neurovisor. Those are 2 sensory systems, right? That what we're going to talk about Garnet Dupuy, who's the founder and developer of the NeuroVIZR. And these are the things that he says are the criteria. Obviously, you don't want to be forced to do it, but it is enjoyable and entertaining. And all those who use the NeuroVIZR kind of say the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And this guy, Garnet Dupuy, was really kind of a genius. And he looked at all the neuroscience that he put into the NeuroVIZR when he created it. And here we go.
To achieve the benefits from the NeuroVIZR, the key principles are getting the brain to pay attention, creating a novel, enriched sensory experience that engages the brain. This is different than entrainment like other systems.
And we're going to really get into the differences here in other systems versus the NeuroVIZR. So we'll break that down for you.
We are creating an engaging sensory experience for the brain to change and learn. To do this, we use the NeuroVIZR to surprise and challenge the brain with this rich sensory information using light and sound.
And as we talked about before, when we talk about surprise, the brain is expecting certain things to happen, and when it doesn't and things change, And that happens because of the light and sound and the way it's arranged in the NeuroVIZR. It creates that surprise. And when we have a surprise, the brain has to rethink, change, and make new pathways, new connections.
So, how does NeuroVisor do this? Well, they're gentle pulses, consistent rhythms, slowly deepening contrasts, creating and breaking a framework of expectation, subtle irregularities in timing, unexpected silences, sudden changes in brightness. This keeps the brain guessing. Moments of unpredictability engage the dopamine system.
So that's kind of the NeuroVIZR in a nutshell.
The real transformation often begins after the session ends, as the brain consolidates these changes.
So, a lot of you, hopefully, have the HeartQuest Professional. So, based on the HeartQuest Professional, what NeuroVisor program would be best?
Here are some HeartQuest Professional patterns and which programs you may want to consider using for the NeuroVisor. One pattern is a high, very low frequency percent. This means the person could be under chronic stress. They may have lost the ability for their autonomic nervous system to regulate their body. Anything else?
Yeah, so with the high VLF, and you're going to see that in most of your chronically unhealthy folks, and it represents many things. And it says here, as far as emotional, because it affects the limbic system where we store that deep emotional uh, information, right? And also, it's involved with the central nervous system, and it's overloaded or it's high on the heart quest. We want to use again peaceful heart, maybe big peace, and we want to reduce the stored, let's say, um, emotional load and improve autonomic nervous system regulation. Okay, you want to do the next one and then I'll comment on that.
Another pattern you might see is low total power. So, our priority there is to rebuild the capacity first. Some suggestions for that would be the entire Brain Gym series. And your goal here is to increase resilience before you do any stronger type of engagement.
And this is one of the low total power impacts all aspects of heart rate variability because you don't have the energy reserves. You need the energy to be able to adapt and to change. So it's a big deal. And so there's the program for that.
The next one you might see is a low high frequency, which represents the parasympathetic nervous system. So your priority here would be to support the parasympathetic nervous system. Some suggestions would be to use peaceful heart, calm down, or still point. You want to improve the recovery side of the autonomic nervous system.
And we see this a lot because a lot of people have the low HF percent. So when you look at the pie that we just showed you, there's very little green. So they're going to have trouble regenerating, and they're going to have trouble possibly because that's the vagus nerve is there too with digestion, and they're going to have problems with maybe, not being able to offset the stress response when they have low HF. You want to do the next one?
Another one might be a high stress index, which is kind of self-explanatory. And your priority there would be to downregulate that overloaded fight or flight sympathetic nervous system drive. Some sessions there would be calm down, big peace, or peaceful heart. And your goal there is to reduce the sympathetic excesses.
Yeah. I mean, very rarely, though, do we see, we mostly see the high stress index. And that's usually, like we said, that's going to be a fight or flight situation where they're stuck in sympathetic nervous system dominance, just like it says there, high stress index. And so this you'll see a lot, actually. And one of my favorite programs there is Peaceful Heart. Next one.
Okay. Another pattern would be the low LF percent, which represents the sympathetic nervous system, along with the low drive or low output. I'm assuming that means the low total power. So there is a depletion, a decreased adrenaline. And what you want to do there is to gently activate the system with using sessions such as Crystal Clear, Centered, or the Brain Gym series. And your goal there is to support activation without overwhelming their system since they are so depleted.
Yeah, and maybe when they have low LF percent, then you're thinking adrenaline. There's no juice.
Right.
So we want to increase the so the person has a little bit of umph, right? Put it back into the system. Usually their adrenals are shot at that point, and I think that's a great way to look at the HQP pattern with the NeuroVIZR and what direction to take.
Yes.
Now, this is just extra, but this is Chris Gold. Now, if you want to combine everything together and actually combine the HeartQuest Professional with other parameters and indices, that is the Chris Gold that writes the reports for you, has all the HeartQuest Professional information in there, and it's going to put out a report in a very short period of time and what NeuroVIZR program to use exactly. So that's another added really, really exciting addition that we're working on right now.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.